Could you survive a night in a medieval dungeon? Picture this. You've been accused of a crime you didn't commit, and you're about to be thrown into a medieval dungeon for the night. The heavy iron door slams shut behind you, and you're plunged into almost complete darkness. The question is, would you actually survive until morning? Let's find out what you'd really be facing in one of history's most terrifying places. The first thing that would hit you isn't the cold or the darkness. It's the smell. Medieval dungeons were essentially human waste depositories. There were no toilets, no drainage systems, and certainly no cleaning crews. Prisoners relieved themselves wherever they could, and that waste just accumulated over months or even years. The ammonia from decomposing urine would burn your nostrils and throat, making it difficult to breathe normally. But that's just the beginning of your problems. Medieval dungeons were typically built underground, or in the lowest levels of castles, specifically designed to be as miserable as possible. Stone walls, stone floors, no windows, and no heating meant temperatures that could drop well below freezing, even in summer. Your body would immediately begin losing heat to the stone floor beneath you. Within minutes, you'd start shivering uncontrollably. Hypothermia could set in within hours, especially if your clothes were damp from the dungeon's perpetual moisture. Your fingers and toes would go numb first, making it nearly impossible to feel around in the darkness. When we say medieval dungeons were dark, we mean absolutely, completely dark. No emergency lighting, no cracks under doors, nothing. Your eyes would never adjust because there's literally no light to adjust to. This creates a psychological nightmare that's hard to imagine. In total darkness, your other senses become hyperactive, but not in a good way. Every sound becomes amplified and terrifying. The scurrying of rats sounds like monsters approaching. Water dripping becomes a torture device, echoing endlessly in your mind. Your brain, desperate for visual input, might start creating hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there. You wouldn't be alone in a medieval dungeon. Rats were constant companions, and they weren't afraid of humans. These weren't the small house mice we might see today. Medieval rats were large, aggressive, and hungry. They'd investigate you immediately, potentially biting exposed skin or trying to get at any food you might have. But rats were just the beginning. Dungeons were also home to spiders, beetles, and other insects that would crawl over you throughout the night. Some prisoners reported waking up with their faces covered in cockroaches. The air quality in medieval dungeons was absolutely toxic. Poor ventilation meant that carbon dioxide would build up, making you feel drowsy and confused. The combination of human waste, decomposing matter, and stagnant air created a cocktail of dangerous gases. Many dungeons were built below ground level, meaning they were prone to flooding. Standing water would become stagnant and breed disease, carrying mosquitoes and other insects. The humidity would make everything feel damp and clammy, including your clothes and any surface you touched. Perhaps the worst part wouldn't be physical, it would be mental. The combination of sensory deprivation and sensory overload would mess with your mind in ways you can't imagine. In complete darkness, your brain loses its normal reference points. You might lose track of time entirely, not knowing if you've been there for hours or days. The sounds would be the worst part. Medieval dungeons weren't soundproof, so you'd hear everything. Other prisoners moaning or crying, guards walking overhead, chains rattling, doors slamming. Each sound would make you wonder if someone was coming for you, and whether that would be good news or terrible news. Finding a place to sit or lie down would be nearly impossible. The floors were often covered in straw that hadn't been changed in months, mixed with human waste and rotting food. Any surface you touched would be damp, cold, and probably covered in something you didn't want to identify. If you tried to sleep, you'd have to choose between lying on the disgusting floor or trying to sleep sitting up against a stone wall. Either way, the cold would wake you up repeatedly, assuming the sounds and smells didn't keep you awake entirely. Medieval dungeons were breeding grounds for disease. Typhus, dysentery, and plague were common. Even a small cut could become infected in such unsanitary conditions. If you had any open wounds when you entered, your chances of survival would drop dramatically. The stagnant water and human waste created perfect conditions for bacteria and parasites. Just breathing the air put you at risk for respiratory infections that could kill you within days. If you somehow found yourself in this situation, your survival would depend on a few key factors. First, you'd need to find the driest, cleanest spot possible, usually near a wall and away from obvious waste areas. You'd want to keep moving periodically to maintain body heat, but not so much that you exhausted yourself. Most importantly, you'd need to maintain your mental health. Talking to yourself, singing, or reciting anything you could remember would help keep your mind active and prevent complete psychological breakdown. Here's the truth. Many people didn't survive even one night in a medieval dungeon. The combination of cold, disease, toxic air, and psychological trauma was often fatal within hours. Those who did survive were forever changed by the experience. Medieval dungeons weren't designed for rehabilitation or even long-term imprisonment. They were designed to break people quickly and completely. They were tools of psychological and physical torture that pushed human endurance to its absolute limits. Could you survive a night in a medieval dungeon physically? It's possible. Humans are remarkably resilient. But the psychological trauma would likely stay with you for the rest of your life. Many survivors of medieval dungeons were found in states of complete mental breakdown, unable to function normally even after their release. The medieval dungeon represents one of humanity's darkest innovations, a place designed specifically to strip away everything that makes us human: dignity, comfort, hope, and sanity. So the next time you complain about a cold room or a bad smell, remember that somewhere in history, people endured conditions so horrific that they're almost beyond imagination. And be very, very grateful that you're living in the modern world. Would you survive? Maybe. But you'd never be the same person again.